Swimmy.
Witches.
Hi, hello. Welcome back to another episode of History,
Yeah.
where we bring words to life.
Yeah, so we're again still working our way slowly through Marian Gibson's Witchcraft: A History in 13 Trials.
Yeah, girl, pick up the pace.
Uh,
Just kidding.
Thank
I'm not doing
you.
it. You're the one who reads $5 a day.
Yeah. Okay. So we're on chapter 7, which is the trial of Marie Catherine Cadière. Cadière?
You want to try that again?
No.
Cadière?
Cadière?
I don't know.
I don't know. Witches reimagined in a French Revolution. If you like a really, really bad French accent, you're going to get a lot of that in this episode because there's lots of places and names and shit.
I love that for you.
But we're starting with our main character energies, parents. So there's this guy named Joseph. And he is marrying his boss's daughter, Elizabeth Pomey. And he takes over her father's olive oil business. So they have 3 sons, Laurent, Francois, and Etienne, and a daughter.
Etienne, maybe?
Etienne, whatever, that's his name. He's not super important till later. And then they had a daughter who died at infancy, and then one more daughter, Marie Catherine, who was born in November 1709. Her father died young, leaving Elizabeth to manage the oil business until Laurent grew old enough to help. And then, so they have this business in town where they have their, like, town residence. And then outside, the city they live in is Toulon, I think. Anyway, they own a small olive farm outside of that town with a house and an oil mill. So they go back and forth between them, and they spend, like, a lot of their summers there. But Marie Catherine, preferred the city to country living, because
Same,
but not for the same reasons necessarily. She liked city living because of the opportunities to do charitable work and to attend religious services and festivals with her friends. She's extremely devout Christian. She's part of France's state-backed Catholic Church. And Elizabeth raised her children to be, like, very pious and church-oriented. So much so that Francois became a priest, studying with the Jesuit order. And Etienne became a Dominican monk.
Good for him.
Oh, yeah. Laurent, too, would have been ordained, but he was needed in the family business. So,
lucky him.
Right? That leaves Marie Catherine with a couple of choices. She can become a nun or marry a pious merchant.
Those are 2 fucking extremes.
Yeah. She can get married to a merchant, or she can become a nun. Those are her only options. She received a basic education, which at the time for her class, because she's, like, not nobility, she's merchant class, that was, like, kind of a big deal, kind of new. She was able to read the holy text. She couldn't really write a lot, but she could read. And she was, quote, she was raised to pray quietly under the guidance of male priests, and then, if she did not become a nun, she could do charitable deeds and raise good Christian sons and daughters. Those sound like great options, you know? So Toulon is a border city facing France's enemies around the Mediterranean, and the people there are constantly living with fear of invasion. The city is heavily defended with 4 forts and hefty gun batteries trained on its harbor. And while in recent history at this time, the walls hadn't fallen, historically, this city had been occupied multiple times. Ottoman forces occupied the city for a while. The city's cathedral became a mosque for Muslim guests for a while. It was just like over and over they were occupied by other countries. But on top of all of those threats of potential like war, occupation, invaders, all of that, bubonic plague was going around during her teen years. So,
Casual.
yeah, it's fine. So during the plague years, which is 1720 to 21, there were no
Better
social
get your
gatherings.
plague vaccine.
Right. Well, they actually reference in the book COVID in that they're like, in a scene that's now grimly familiar to us. There were no social gatherings, no Christmas festivities. People lived in fear and the death toll mounted daily. Between the autumn of 1720 and the summer of 1721, half of the city's population died. So,
damn.
Yeah, it was quite the plague. For the next 4 or 5 years, the city would endure like waves of infection. And a lot of people were just permanently in mourning because like someone would die, they would go into mourning, someone else would die, they would go into mourning. It was like a perpetual thing. But when a new Jesuit priest, Jean-Baptiste Girard, arrived in Toulon in 1728, looking to make a splash in religious life, he knew he was going to have to offer something more than what they had been living, which was like panic and isolation and fear. Ironically and, conveniently, Jean-Baptiste's specialty was the guidance of women and girls. Previously, he was a confessor to nuns, and now he aimed to inspire women beyond the convent by telling them stories of female saints and mystics.
I feel like that's just a ploy to get them alone, and then he raped them.
Well. Ding, ding, ding.
Was I right?
We'll see.
Oh.
He tells these stories of all these mystics. The last 2 stories he tells them are these 2 famous French nuns who promoted meditation on an image of Christ's Sacred Heart as a way to strengthen faith. That will be important later. Keep that in your head.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So he's giving them all of these female role models in the faith. One in particular was a local woman named Anne Madeline. Anne Madeline. And she lived until 1730. She had visions, and her visions shaped the Festival of the Sacred Heart, which it was a massive public church service where they used prayer to fight the plague. Now, they didn't understand this then, but we know now that getting a huge fucking group of people together in plague times is a bad idea, and that obviously spread the plague to a lot of people. But they thought it was a great idea. They
didn't pray hard enough, okay?
Right, they didn't pray hard enough. They were not devout enough.
And if they were devout enough, then this was just God's will.
It was God's will. Those people just were meant to die. But Jean-Baptiste
sorry about you.
knew Anne Madeline personally, and he shared tales of her visions and prophecies with his pupils. So he has like this small little group of pupils. They're all female. And he, whether he knew it or not, although I think he did, he's building a little cult.
Yeah.
His students begin to fall a little bit in love with him. There are many students of his. Some of them are named. There's Marie Catherine, Claire, Anne, Marie Anne, the older Anne Marie, Anne Rose, Teresa. There's all these different ones, but Marie Catherine was just 18, and she was starstruck. She joined this group. She was like kind of obsessed with his teachings, and he became her personal mentor. In fact, he was so concerned for her religious development that he began to visit her at home, and he would loan her his personal books and go to her house. And he told her that direct access to God was possible.
Mm-hmm.
So in the summer of 1729, Marie Catherine begins to experience what she thinks is an intense personal relationship with God. Unusually, though, this went beyond just typical prayers and meditations. It caused her to fall into extremes of joy, like euphoria, and then on the flip side of that, into agony. She would scream and weep and have fits, basically.
Because he wasn't hitting her spot correctly.
She started to have visions that filled her head with the images of the sins of the world. This was not uncommon for the time because, much like people now who like to rage at like corporations and how evil corporations are, that was what they did. Like the pious did in that time. They would focus on all of the negative, ugly things. So her having visions of all the sins of the world was like the norm for this kind of situation.
Of course it was.
So she starts to see the Christ Sacred Heart in her visions, which, if you'll remember, was a big thing with Anne Madeline. And another mystic or seer, I guess, was Marguerite Marie Alcock. I don't know. Marguerite Marie devoted herself to the heart's image to the extent that she started carving it into her body. She would use knives and fire as she attempted to make the heart shape on her breast. Because of her teacher, Jean-Baptiste, Marie Catherine is very versed in this story, and all of a sudden, she too starts to get these physical marks that bleed. And Jean-Baptiste and his followers called these stigmata, which were representations of the wounds of Christ. Marie Catherine would bring like her bloodstained clothes with depictions of the face of Christ in the blood droplets, and a wooden cross that she said Jesus gave her in a vision. And like a lot of these people in this town or city started like coming to her house to visit her and to see her visions and shit. Mind you, with all of this, Jean-Baptiste is by her side through all of it. And because she's having these like markings on her body, as all these people are coming through her room and as Jean-Baptiste is spending all this time alone with her in her room, she is barely clothed. Barely clothed. Because they want to see the markings. In one of these visions, she describes that she met John the Baptist, which is who the prophet that Jean-Baptiste was named after. So like she had a vision of the actual John the Baptist from like Jesus times. And he showed her a book, and the name in the book said Marie Catherine Jean-Baptiste. So as if they had become one person. This book was like a ledger, and it was signed Marie Catherine Jean-Baptiste, like one person. Some of the less like religious people started to kind of laugh at this. They were like, okay. So, because of that, some of the churchgoers and the congregations were starting to be like, this is a little weird.
Yeah.
And because of that, like her visions are starting to be filled with imagery of love and passion. Um, her body is exposed all the time to these people coming through her room. And so they're finally starting to ask bigger questions. What if Marie Catherine's visions were not sent by God, but by the devil? Obviously, that was more common than godly visions because, you know, why would God send visions when the devil could just send them all? I don't know. But in any event, they are now doubting whether, or some people are doubting whether her visions are holy or not. Usually, these kind of questions or like suspicions would be resolved by the church investigating. And in this case, Jean Baptiste, who is a Jesuit? Anyway,
I think it's
he's
Jesuit.
a Jesuit. He's a priest. And he says that she is a vessel for God's passion. So it's fine. She continues to get a little bit more extreme. She's hurting herself a lot more. She's fasting. She is sometimes becoming almost like catatonic. So in June 1730, they decide to have her. It says she was asked to visit. I'm assuming she was forced to visit a local convent. And the nuns were supposed to manage her condition. And she remained there for several months and was regularly visited by who? Jean Baptiste.
The rapist.
Yes. So he is visiting her constantly and he's writing her letters like multiple times a day. Like it's a lot. And in autumn of 1730, Marie Catherine just decides she's going to leave the convent. She runs away and she tells her family and friendly churchmen that Jean Baptiste had abused his position to seduce and rape her. She became pregnant with his child. Wonder if that's why she was sent to the nuns. And then he dosed her with a drug that caused her to miscarry. So now people are like, Satan is at work here. It's Satan. Witchcraft. Did Satan create Marie Catherine's visions, fooling everyone, or is he deluding her, planting false memories of abuse? Like, what if one of the two, either Marie Catherine or Jean Baptiste, had been working with Satan, like, to make all of this happen?
It's definitely the female doing it.
Well, you would think normally, but this story actually is pretty evenly split. Some people began to say openly that Marie Catherine was a witch. She was an abortionist, a baby killer. She was a seductress, and she enchanted that priest, and that poor priest was enchanted by her charms. But she was pretty well known in this city. And others are saying, I don't know about that. Marie Catherine was not like that. She was pious. She was a good woman. She's guiltless. The witch was that rapist and abortionist, Jean-Baptiste Girard. This kind of goes back and forth for a hot minute, and eventually they decide, or the city's bishop is like, no, Marie Catherine is a holy prodigy. This is not a thing. So he sends her, he sent a carriage to get her from the convent. So when she ran away from the convent, the city's bishop actually sent a carriage to pick her up and bring her back to the church. And she asked for a new confessor. So this man's name is Nicholas. I'm not even gonna fucking try. Garreau, I think. It's like 17 vowels and an X at the end. I think it's Garreau. And he, she's gonna confess to him, and she tells him that Jean-Baptiste raped her, that she became pregnant. That's why she was sent to the convent, and now and then he forced her to take like basically poison to make her miscarry. She said in this confession that one day Jean-Baptiste blew into her mouth. And as his breath entered her, she felt changed. She could not pray as she had before. The words wouldn't come. Her vision started to become sexual. And it was then that Jean-Baptiste began his seduction. Soon she was waking from her visions to discover that she had been raped. The confessor, Nicholas, told the bishop he suspected love magic. And blowing into a person's mouth was like a suspected form of magic in that time period. And it was believed that it could force unwilling people into an infatuation with their bewitcher or render them vulnerable to attack. So Nicholas, hearing this confession, is like, she's definitely been bewitched, but unfortunately, she's also now possessed by Satan. So that fucking sucks. They're like, Jean-Baptiste blew the devil right in through her mouth. Blew the devil in. You know?
Why was he so close to her mouth, though?
But why is he alone with her when she's basically naked? Like, doesn't he have some kind of vow of, like, chastity or something? I don't know. This is a hot mess.
You would think.
But Nicholas tells this to the bishop and tells her family that he believes she's been sexually abused and is now demonically possessed. If you'll remember correctly, 2 of her brothers are churchmen. One is a monk and the other one is a priest. And so they start doing exorcisms to drive out Satan. The bishop is like, whoa, this is getting a little crazy. Let me step back for a minute. It's damaging his reputation and the reputation of his diocese with the various religious sects competing over the story. On one side, the Jesuits are lobbying that Jean-Baptiste is innocent. On the other side, the Protestants are claiming that Jean-Baptiste is guilty. And the orders of the monks are also protesting that he's guilty. So there's like lots of different back and forth, and the bishop is like, oh fuck, I don't know. And he calls the king for help. The king sends them to the province's highest court, the Grand Chamber of Parliament. It says it in French, but that's what it means. It's 25 noblemen judges who meet about 35 miles from Toulon under the authority of the king. So there are lawyers appointed to the 2 parties before these judges. The pre-trial investigation, of course, leans toward favoring Jean-Baptiste. Because a lot of the officials who are carrying out these questionings have links to the Jesuit order.
So of course they're not going to throw one of their own under the bus.
Yeah, and some of them said, even if he did sin sexually, it's not right to expose him, and we don't believe he's a witch. What in the Brock Turner? What? Okay. Anyway, Marie Catherine was imprisoned by court order in a Toulon convent whose nuns had Jesuit connections. 2 of her friends from Jean-Baptiste's cult were pressured to accuse her of fraud. They claimed that she intended all along to deceive Jean-Baptiste with fake visions. The nuns that she stayed with during her pregnancy and abortion were asked to sign pre-drafted statements rejecting the validity of her trances. One of those nuns said, but I saw him kiss her and hold hands with her. And she was threatened.
Of course.
Yeah. The priest from that convent or diocese, whatever, was asked to denounce Marie Catherine. And in return, a charge against him that he had raped a 13-year-old girl would be dropped. And then...
cool. Never talk to her again, and you won't be labeled a rapist.
Yeah.
A pedophile rapist. Cool.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. So then, pornographic images, drawings of Marie Catherine and Jean-Baptiste start to circulate. And in all of these drawings, they're propaganda, basically. She looks like a prostitute, propositioning him for sex. Then we continue into the bias of this court. Formal summonses are sent to Marie Catherine, her new confessor Nicholas, and her two brothers to appear in person for interrogation. But they're going to let Jean-Baptiste skip attendance and be represented by a lawyer. They're basically just making this shit up as they go.
Yeah, they don't really care.
And they're enabled to do this by the vagueness of the law. This impression is strengthened when she is questioned 3 times for up to 11 hours per session. She was allowed a lawyer to sit with her, but had to answer in her own voice and from the resources of her own mind. She wasn't technically tortured, but she was bullied and shamed, and the line of questioning was like, why are you a whore? Not what happened to you.
It was definitely victim.
Yeah, for sure. Shaming.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so during this final round of questioning, she finally breaks down. Remind you, final round of questioning. This is the 3rd time she's been questioned for 11 hours straight. She finally breaks down. She's dripping tears, and she confesses that her story of sexual abuse was a lie. And she says that Father Nicholas invented the accusations against Jean-Baptiste. But within 4 days, she goes back to her lawyer, retracts her retraction, and launches a legal protest concerning the abuse that she endured from Parliament and Toulon authorities. She alleges that she was forced to drink wine or spirits before her interrogation, and she felt outside of herself and she didn't know what she said during that interrogation. She also produced an anonymous threatening letter that ordered her to withdraw her accusations. So that whole confession was clearly forced and false. It was just ridiculous. Mm-hmm. So she is not giving up. She's back in court. She is allowed representation in court, and she has a lawyer. His name is also Jean-Baptiste, but it's Jean-Baptiste Chowden, and we're going to call him Chowden, so it's not confusing. So her lawyer is Chowden. He went on the offensive. As soon as the trial began, he is like, Jean-Baptiste Girard is should be charged with witchcraft, spiritual incest, meaning the rape in a confessional relationship, because at the time he was her confessor. So how is she gonna confess her sins of this like carnal stuff to the person who is attacking her? It's not gonna happen. He's also charging him with abortion and the heresy of quietism, which at the time was a theological position urging Christians to accept their sinful impulses quietly. So, like, it's okay if you're sinning, just do it. Shh, shh, be quiet about it. It's fine. Shh. And it's all okay. Huh? Yeah. Anyway, Chowden said that Jean-Baptiste seduced Mary Catherine with both magic and theological argument and cast a love spell by blowing into her mouth, then told Marie Catherine that that her attraction shouldn't be resisted. She should just go with it. Jean-Baptiste's lawyer, Claude Francois, is like, a witchcraft is a nursery tale. Arguments about witchcraft belong in a school of philosophy, not a court of law. He basically said witchcraft does not exist. Which then is interesting. Because if Jean-Baptiste's lawyer said that he could not be a witch because there is no such thing as witches, he can then not turn around and accuse Marie Catherine of being a witch because they don't exist. So confusion reigns. They're all like, what? But you charged her with this, but you said it's not real, so it's a whole thing. But the delay in the case, because of this confusion, works in Marie Catherine's favor. She has a parliament representative who makes progress on her behalf. He obtains her freedom from prison and gets it to where Jean-Baptiste is imprisoned instead. And
nice.
The court of public opinion is on her side. There is a mob.
Also love that.
Yes, there is a mob outside of the jail where Jean-Baptiste is, and said mob is on Marie Catherine's side. The unfortunate part of this is that the noblemen and the parliament are not on her side necessarily. The full parliament of 25 men hears all of the evidence, but a panel of 5 votes.
Okay.
3 of those 5 blame Marie Catherine entirely. They say she's a fake mystic. They want to sentence her to be hanged because she abused the religion and all of these things. The other 2 believe that Jean Baptiste was a sex offender and a heretic who should be both hanged and burned. However, they also think that Marie Catherine should be sent to a convent for 3 years for lying about her visions. Ultimately, this first verdict is that she's going to be hanged. So is he, but so is she. The panel announced that decision, and the public fucking rioted. They lost their fucking minds. They gathered outside her cell, and they did not believe that she committed sacrilege or blasphemy or that she had lied. And they're like, so why is she being executed? This makes no fucking sense. The church and the upper classes, a coalition of noblemen and churchmen, are defending one of their own at the expense of an ordinary city girl, is what they were. The point was basically of the mob. Parliament was like, oh fuck, okay, we gotta relook at this. Let's look at this again. All 25 members of the parliament went over the trial's evidence again, and this time all 25 voted. The accused and witnesses were all re-questioned, and there was a stalemate. They couldn't decide. So Marie Catherine was like, let me question Jean Baptiste. And they do. On October 4th, the court meets and Marie Catherine is set loose on Jean Baptiste. And she's asking him, she's like, it was true that you seduced me, wasn't it? You called me your idol, impregnated me, gave me abortion drugs. Why didn't you give the court all 80 of the letters that we sent back and forth? Isn't another one of your devotees pregnant by you? She goes on and on and on and on. And the people that witnessed this takedown basically agreed that she won this exchange. They said such modesty, spirit, and firmness in a girl whose age, birth, and education does not allow for such performances seemed a wonder. And the one notable thing is that in this back and forth exchange between them, neither one of them accuses the other of witchcraft. So in this final trial, in the beginning that was thrown around, but in this final trial it is not. The final judgment after all of this is delivered on October 10th, 1731. First, Jean Baptiste was judged. 12 of the parliament members acquitted him of any wrongdoing. 1 said that he behaved foolishly but was not guilty of the major offenses alleged against him. That judge said he should be suspended from the priesthood but otherwise not punished. The remaining 12 judges, which end up being the minority because of that 13th judge basically siding with the other side, ruled that he should be burned as a witch, rapist, abortionist, and heretic. So very close he came to...
I'd be vibing with those peeps. I'd be like, yeah, you did right.
Yeah, very close he came to dying.
Fucker.
Then the verdicts for Marie Catherine were handed down. 13 of the 25 judges acquitted her of any crime. So 13 of 25, she is free to go. The other 12 voted to imprison her in a convent for periods of between 2 and 10 years as a liar and a fake mystic. The parliament was fairly evenly split on both of these, but they both got acquitted. So they're both released from prison, allowed home. Both cases are dismissed. This would be France's last witch trial. Jean Baptiste retreated to northern France, where he died 2 years later.
Yeah.
And very few people, even of his own like brotherhood of priests believed that he was innocent. Like most of them believed he was guilty. Marie Catherine thanked the judges, went home, and on her way home, it was like, you know those videos on TikTok right now of the Jennifer Hudson show when they're like walking down the thing and they're like making up a song about the person, you know? That's what I imagine. She's walking down the street to her home and the public is there just like fucking cheering her on and like all kinds of happiness. And then she just disappears from history. The guess
she was a witch
of historians is that she probably went into hiding to like get away from this notoriety because, you know, while he might have been able to go on living acting like nothing happened because he's a man, that same luxury is never going to be afforded to a woman. So the likelihood or the thought is that she disappeared from history. She could have also gotten married because she's very popular right now, obviously. So maybe she got married and that's why she was lost to history because the marriage documents weren't found. I don't know. But the big important thing of this case is that the definition of witchcraft is starting to change.
Good.
The old definitions of witchcraft were like that you signed a contract with the devil, that you did all of these things. But the new kind of witchcraft that these two were accused of was like baby killing by abortion, not curses. They were both imagined as sexual sinners, seducing people by magic, not at a Sabbath by inducting them into a demonic cult, but merely by seducing them by normal methods. They were both accused of attacking pious people's reputations with poisonous words rather than murdering them with spells and potions. So basically, this is becoming more of a thing of like politics and intrigue, and witchcraft is changing. And the definition that people will use to accuse people of witchcraft is changing. So that's the important thing to take from this. That and that they both were acquitted and she lived.
She lived to tell the tale.
She did.
Which
then
is
she disappeared, but
that's fine. She's like, all right, I got my 5 minutes of fame. I'm going to go to a different city.
Yeah. And that is the trial of Marie Catherine Cadière.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
It's not often you hear of someone getting acquitted.
No. And unfortunately, he was also acquitted and not charged with like the rape or anything like that. But in the court of public opinion, he definitely was. And I mean,
his brotherhood would have shunned him regardless. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be honest, the brotherhood could have shunned him, and that's probably what led to his early death.
Right.
So, nice. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, until next time.
Bye.